Good morning, everyone. I am Arushi Dogra, Joint Secretary, Synergia. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you all to one of the most inspiring and intellectual personality ever, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Varshney. He is leading the International Cooperation Division of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. This includes facilitation of scientific cooperation in bilateral, multilateral, and regional mode. He is an Indian co-chair, governing body, Indo-German Science and Technology Center, and Indo-US Endowment Board member to promote industrial R&D from India with Germany and United States. He is member governing councils of the number 1 US India Education Foundation, promoting educational and research cooperation, and second, International Advanced Research Center of Powder Metallurgy, pursuing research in metallurgy. He is board of directors of a private limited company and Global Innovation and Technology Alliance engaged in technology commercialization. He is an Indian Sherpa for Caronic Group of Science and Technology Ministers, Indian focal point for BRICS Working Group on Science and Technology, and Indian representative on OECD Committee on Science and Technology Policy, and to International Center on Science and Technology Information, Moscow. He is member Board of Research Studies in Department of Geology, Aligarh Muslim University. He has worked as counselor with the Embassy of India in Moscow to facilitate bilateral scientific cooperation between India and Russia during April 2008 to June 2011. He has been contributing to promotion of international scientific cooperation as well as scientific industrial cooperation. He completed MSc Geology in 1984 from Aligarh Muslim University and was awarded University Medal for obtaining first position. He also pursued doctoral research at University of Delhi during 1985 to 1990 on Himalayan river systems, sedimentation, diagenetic, and tectonic modifications. He qualified UGC NET in 1985 for Junior Research Fellowship and Lecturership. He was also awarded Dr. D.N. Vadia Research Fellowship in 1986 for his research on Himalayan geology. He is Life Fellow of Geological Society of India, Bangalore, Nepal Geological Society, Kathmandu, and member of International Association of Sedimentologists, Oxford. He also has numerous certifications to his credit. He also taught at Kurukshetra University in 1990. He regularly writes on international scientific cooperation and also on science articles of contemporary interest. Get ready, everyone, for a comprehensive lecture. With a huge round of applause, everybody welcome Dr. S.K. Varshney.
Namaskar, everyone. I'm Sanjeev Varshney. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Deshbandhu College for hosting this society, Synergia. It's a beautiful arrangement wherein you bring in students of 3 streams to work together, and they help us in understanding how science moves. Today, I was told that I would be talking mostly to this member of this Life Science Society. And so I have kept my focus on life sciences. But nevertheless, I would like to say that we are a member of a very, very unique planet called Earth, where life is there. And life is very important. But then there are certain facts which we know. For example, life requires several things. Living persons or plants, they are growing up. For growing up, they need energy, they need food, they excrete, and then they are mutually interdependent on several of things. including respiration system. But biology alone does not control everything. And this is the essence, even my friend Dr. Rajiv Agarwal, the principal, also mentioned that there are not only biotic factors, but also number of abiotic factors which directly influence life on this planet. You know, still there are questions which we have not understood, like how the life originated on this planet, even how the birth and death take place. We have not fully understood, like we have understood the process, how it takes place, but how, when it will happen, that we are not very clear. Similarly, how some species will be living on this planet and how some of them have extinct, we don't know. So the process of forming life, process of forming new species is a very, very complex phenomena. And our Earth offers us services of several abiotic factors like atmosphere, which brings us air, help us in respiration, protects the harmful solar rays, the hydrosphere, which is elixir of our life, and the lithosphere, where most of us are living. So what I'm trying to say, that life depends on both biotic and abiotic factors, and we should be understanding both of them. So it is very important for biology student to understand what could be the other factors that may influence life on this earth. Today, I will talk about some of the basic challenges which we are facing, and then we will discuss about the approaches, the newer approaches which we have taken to meet those challenges. One of the challenge is food. You know, food is the essential thing which all living, whether animal or plants, require for their growth. It's something which we require daily. And it is something which is very essential. And if you don't take food for a certain period, you will have some difficulty. So world is very unevenly distributed. Some part of the world are having good food, and many parts are suffering with bad food or malnutrition or lack of food. On the other hand, one of the simplest things what we feel is water. But again, the distribution of water is very different. Even in India, for example, on the north side, we have the riverian plains where a lot of rivers are there. But in southern part of the country, there are hard rocks and there are challenges in the ground. But it's not the availability of water alone. It is its composition, its chemical and its biological influences or the pollutants which brings in the water, which makes it more and more challenging. Other challenge is healthcare. Now, healthcare is such an issue that each one of us is quite concerned that all of us should get reasonable Medicare facilities. So we'll discuss about that. What are the things happening? Energy is a constant requirement. And in fact, in several parts of the world, energy is considered as the progress indicator. If you consume more energy, you are more progressive, or more developed. If you consume less energy, then you are less developed. But the debate has started. What are good energy and what are bad? So traditional energy, which have been thermal energy or gas-based energy, are harmful because they not only eat away our resources, natural resources, but also it brings back a lot of pollutants. And fifth challenge, which I am trying to address today, is the environment. Now, environment is very, very critical. And we are living in Delhi, and we know how Delhi winters have been, how difficult it is to live in. The river, which is on our back, our side, Yamuna, is so contaminated, so polluted. How are we going to do it? Are we going to live it? So these are some of the basic challenges. And then we have got number of emerging technologies which are there, which includes artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, nanotechnologies, space research, manufacturing industries, and clean fuel. There could be many more, but what I thought today, that I will pick up some of these technologies and then share with you how we can meet the challenges, the basic challenges which we require to survive on this planet. Now, before I go into the challenges, I just want to give you a picture of people's expectations. Now, when we are working on a problem, when we are working on an issue, there are a lot of load of expectations. You see, we should be careful about the natural system. It should be how our environment is going to be there, what are our resources, how ecosystem would be there, what would be the climate things. And then we should be looking about individuals, quality of life, well-being, self-development. We have to see the economy, its production, consumption, employment. And then, of course, we have to see how it meets the society. So what I'm trying to say is, when we are working out solution of any given problem, it looks very, very complex. And there is a requirement that we need to organize ourselves. So we need to have an idea, work with the quality, be creative, develop some business opportunity, innovation, teamwork, strategy, and then we could think of a solution, success, or a reason. Remember, until we define these aspects, we remain jumbled. So we need to correct ourselves, we need to organize ourselves, and that is how we could play a role. But one of the most important thing is the ethics. Now, of course, ethics play a very, very important role, and we need to be very, very clear what we are going to do. I'll discuss it a little later. So now let us come to the challenges. Now, basic challenge is food. And as you know, that we are a country which was known as the agrarian countries. We are supposed to grow food good enough to meet our requirement. But over the period, in the process of urbanization, we have lost two things. We have lost agricultural land, and we have lost people in agriculture. So this remains a challenge which we need to address. Second thing is that we are facing a lot of difficulty in transportation of crop from farm to our table in our home, to our dining table in our home. And there are very, very severe losses. And these losses are of the order of 30%, which is quite huge by any standard. These are quite large. And third thing is, we need to be careful about the packaging. That when we are storing food, how it should be preserved and how it should be transported. So these are some of the questions. Now, what are our solutions? Now, this is one of the solutions which we call precision agriculture. And now I'll give you a very, very interesting term. You may Google it out, and that is green desert. Can desert be green? That's a challenge. That was a challenge which Israel took. And today, Israel is known for its better agriculture management. And this has become possible because of precision agriculture, which employs lot of new technologies, including sensor and remote sensing, precision positioning system, geo mapping, integrated electronics, variable rate technology, automated steering technology. Now, what is happening? That we need to identify a farmland. We need to know what is the distance we need to keep between various seeds, and then how we should water them. Okay. Now, in India, what is happening that most of the fresh water is being used for irrigation purposes, nearly 30 to 40% of water, which is quite large. And we could save a lot of water because entire farmland does not need water. Water is required only at the point where your seeds are. So for this, the combinations of various technologies, we have come up that if we could do the mapping of the farmland, we know where we have placed our seeds, and that is where germination is required. And if we could water them, we could expose them to the sun, we could bring in more and more results to this. So this is what I'm trying, as we started. So agriculture is not alone of biology. So there are several interferences, several applications which bring in from different sciences. So as a biologist, you should be aware of the opportunities which are available in different branches of sciences and how you could apply them. The next issue is crop water budgeting. You know, we know that for different kind of crops, we require different kind of water. For example, for tea crop, we require very heavy water, but to stay for a smaller duration. So that is why we grow tea mostly on the mountain slopes or hill slopes. For paddy, we require a lot of standing water. But what is happening over the period? Farmers have realized where can they make more money. So in that process, they have gone more for cash crops rather than regular crops. And this has disturbed the water balance. Ideal example is Punjab. Punjab was typically known as wheat producing state. And they have shifted to paddy, which requires a lot of water. Now, what has happened that because they have overdrawn water from the system, lot of groundwater level in Punjab has gone deep down, and now a lot of diseases have come. So we need to be very clear when we are going for this water budgeting that what are things we require, and if we grow our crops depending upon the agroclimatic zone we are in, the kind of rainfall or other water possibility what we have got, and should we provide them short-term water, long-term water. So we need to do this water budgeting, and we should assess risk associated with high water consuming crops because they eventually let us down. Then, because of urbanization, our land is decreasing, agricultural land is decreasing. But on the other hand, our population is increasing. So we need to constantly work on improving the agricultural yield. So we have to see what are the technologies, what are the methods through which we could improve the yield. And it's not only yield, but also the nutrient. There are two kinds of nutrient, one for the plant and one for the crop which human are going to consume. So we need to put a lot of efforts in studying the soil composition, the soil nutrition, and then what are the supplements we need to give so that we could bring in a healthy plant and which could give us fruits or crops or grains which could be more nutritious. Then there is a debate on the genetically modified. So this is another kind of food, and why we are doing is we are doing it to increase yield, to increase nutrition, to improve the flavor. So these were the purpose for which genetically modified crops were brought in. But then there is a lot of social resistance. So we need to understand, while science may provide you certain solutions, if these are not accepted by the society. So these are two different aspects, but scientifically we can prove, we can develop crops with high yield, high nutrition, and good flavor of what we need. On the other hand, we are going for organic farming, where we are not using any pesticides. It is all natural processes, and even fertilizer is bio fertilizer, so vermicompost, manures. So those kind of things we are using. So totally, we are depending on, as far as input are concerned, except sun, water, and air, all other things are biotic. So we are going for organic farming, and there is a huge demand for this. So what I'm trying to tell you is these are several sectors in which new research is going on. Then we are worried about the post-harvest losses. So we have grown the crops, crops have emerged, and now what is happening? So one is that there are a lot of perishable items. We need to know how we can improve them. And that is a very, very critical question. As I said earlier, we are having 30 to 40% losses, which is quite criminal in character, and we need to improve this. And what we have done is we have come up something what we call cold chain technology. So you might have seen that several crops are transported in normal vehicles, but then those which are perishable are transported in refrigerated vehicle, and we call this process cold chain technologies processes. And these days when we are talking of vaccines, even vaccines are transported in cold chain environment. So this is how we can preserve. So it's kind of deep freezer where we can preserve the food items for much, much longer period. And then another thing what we are following is irradiation. Now, irradiation is primarily to increase the shelf life and to disinfect and also to reduce the pathogen. And this technology is being used for several things like perishable foods, sprouts like onion, potato, ginger, garlic, and then our pulses, dry fruits, cereals. We are increasing shelf life of several meat products like chicken, meat, fish, spices. We are reducing the pathogen. So these are the technologies where a lot of research work is being done, that how we can cut down post-harvest losses, and for that we are doing a lot of research work. The third important item is packaging. What is happening that when we are doing packaging, the first requirement is that packaging should not react with the food item. Any container or any packing that reacts with the food will spoil it. And for that, what is happening? That now several things have been tried. For example, you take a packet of any namkeen. Okay, now this namkeen packet when you take, so there are a lot of preservatives added to keep that namkeen fresh. So when you open it, then only those preservatives will evaporate a little, but otherwise they are there. And unless you expose the namkeen to moisture, to the air for a very long time, they remain fresh. So packaging is another area of research where a lot of efforts is being made to sustain the food for a much longer period than normal. Now, second question is water. Now, I think all of us need a good education on water. So this is the second challenge which I described in the beginning. And before I come on water, let me go back to agriculture. One of the major challenge in agriculture is, again, abiotic. All of us are exposed. We are exposed to natural calamities. So we need to constantly monitor what is the weather of that particular year. Of course, we know the climate, we know what are the agroclimatic zones in which a particular crop will grow, but then the role of weather, because for example, we are monsoon dependent country. Sometimes we get deficient monsoon, sometimes we get surplus monsoon, and sometimes we get normal monsoon. And each year, our weather department will make a prediction. And we need to plan our crop according to predictions given by weather department. Suppose we are going to get more rains, then we should plan accordingly. And then if there is no rain or less rain, then we should plan. So weather plays, weather and weather vagaries. For example, today, several parts of the country are flooded. Some part of the country are being affected by landslides. So it impacts on the overall agriculture. And we need to understand how we can protect it. So these are some of the abiotic factors which as a biologist you must take care. And second thing is water education. Now, why I'm saying education? Because still many of us do not know how to make optimal use of the water. Something that could be done by a mug of water, we are using buckets. So be it our brushing habit, be it our shaving habit, be it our bathing habits, or be it our washing the clothes or utensils. But this is not all. We are using a lot of water in our agriculture, in our industries, and it is kind of unmonitored. Remember, we have got very little water. Earth has got 70% water, but out of those 70%, only 3% is fresh water. And if you see the fresh water, out of that 3%, nearly 80% water is in the form of glacier or in permafrost. So only 20% of the fresh water is available to us through rivers, through rains, and we need to make good use of it. And if we are wasting water, so what I feel that each one of us must be very conscious on the use of water, and if possible, we should educate others on the water utilization. So now the first slide I have shown is the water. So we are getting water from the tap, but then there are several processes behind that. And remember, there are two different kind of challenges we are facing. One is availability of water at a particular location. And secondly, making it sure it is portable. So what is happening in several of our places, water is polluted. And those pollutants are mixing up. And even sometimes we are adding up. For example, the water which we use after our utilization, it becomes contaminated. Some of us is ill taking medicines. So when we excrete, it mixes with the water and the chemicals of the drugs which we have taken, that goes. We are using cosmetics. We are washing our face. So cosmetic also go. So it's not only the soap, but several other things which we are adding in the water. So we are working a lot, number one, on supply of water. We are working on making water safe water, and safety, of course, we need to see what is the chemical compositions, what are the biological mix, what are the microbes in the water, and how we can address them. Okay, and several pockets of the country have been identified if they are arsenic rich, fluoride rich, or some other pollutants are there. But it's not on. This is an ever-going exercise because if we see a river in our neighborhood which is turned virtually black, Yamuna, we realize that the kind of pollution which is being added include industrial effluents, it includes household wastage, it includes several things. And then we need to correct. Now, I would invite you to go to Barapula drain. Before it mixes with the Yamuna, there are some biological interventions. So we have planted crops over there in the drain, which absorbs most of the pollutant by themselves. So we need to identify plants which can absorb pollutants so that least amount of pollutant goes to the river. So this is a sample project which we have done. So near Barapula, there is a clock near Sarai Kalika. So if you go behind that, then you will find a project being done, and it's quite interesting. And immediately after this water is how to treat wastewater, because we get wastewater after the use which we have done. So I have brushed my teeth, water has gone down the sink, but where ultimately it is going? So we get a lot of wastewater from hospitals, from homes, from factories, and we need to constantly work on that. Okay, we need to define what kind of water we are getting and what are the corrections required, how it could happen through the process of sedimentation, what are the chemical intervention we need to do, and if required, some biological interventions, so that we could recycle that. Water is limited. We need to recycle it. If we don't recycle it, then the way our number is growing, we may not have water enough for generation next. Third thing is when we are processing water, and this I have taken a picture of a desalination plant. For example, Lakshadweep. Now Lakshadweep from all around has sea. So their basic resource for using fresh water is that we need to improve upon the saline water of the sea. So we are going for desalination. Now, desalination is not only a process, but also it costs a lot of energy. So we need to conserve that energy. And what we have done in Lakshadweep, we have started a solar plant. So the entire energy supply is through solar energy. So there is no hard load on the other energy system, and the entire union territory of Lakshadweep gets water from a major distillation plant located in the sea near the island, and it is getting. So we need to become more and more energy efficient. Now, what has happened? That we have been spoiled. Now, there are several companies which are selling water-related products, and they will tell us that even if you are getting municipal supplied water, you need to process it at home. So we are going through either AquaGuard, or that is UVRB ultraviolet treatment, or we are going through reverse osmosis, or simply we are using a mechanical filter. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of things, but we need to be very, very clear what are the energy requirements. Can we reduce it? And of course, the next picture is of rainwater harvesting, and we need to learn conservation. So of course, this is right now more and more bookish, and we would like to see that at least the new construction which is coming up all around the country should have provision for conserving the water. Now, coming to the field of energy, which is another challenge. India is one of the energy deficient countries, and we are trying all kinds of energy to be brought in our place. So This is a typical thermal power plant, which I have shown you here, and we have plenty of them. But the problem is that our coal, petroleum, or gas is going to be for a limited period. So we need to find solutions. What will happen when our resources like coal, petroleum, and gases are cut down? So we need to work out newer solutions. Of course, here also a lot of work is there to improve various parts of the projects, to improve upon transmission losses and other things. But these are the things which we are working. And then there are a lot of other sources of energy which we are trying to use. So primary is this hydro energy, which is just next to our thermal energy, which we are using. Then we have got nuclear energy. Now there is a huge debate in our country. Should we go for nuclear, for expansion of nuclear plant or not? Again, there are a lot of social challenges, and because of which we have not grown number of nuclear energy plants in the country, although it was intended. So we have seen accidents like Fukushima or Chernobyl. People are quite concerned that losses to the humanity could be much more. So we are not going for large number of this. Otherwise, India would have been energy surplus country if we had gone for this operation. So now we have shifted our focus on 3 other energy. The major one is solar energy. So now here, currently what we are trying to work upon is how we could make these solar power chips more efficient. How we can increase their life, because normally they would last for about 5 years. And each year their efficiency will come down because of settlement of dust on them. So can we clean them? Can we improve their sun absorption capacity or heat absorption capacity? So this is another constant work. And then we are working on wind energy. And since you are a biology student, so I thought even biofuel play a very important role. And there are a lot of feedstock which remains unusable for a variety of reasons. So what we are trying to do is we are converting that feedstock into biofuel. And I'm so happy to tell you that in country like Brazil, which is called sugarcane country, lot of biofuel is in use. In India also, we have flown a flight that was Indigo flight from Dehradun to Delhi using biofuel. So we are also working on these aspects. But the new focus, what we are doing is, one, we would like to use clean energy. So hydrogen is the new focus. Now, you will find in time to come around the world, lot of vehicles drawn on, which are driven on hydrogen energy. In India also, we have started working on hydrogen energy, and we are trying our best that how it could be of use. Second is, again, energy storage. That's a major challenge. You know, like in our phone, we are used to lithium batteries. Now, lithium is found only at certain places in Africa. So availability of lithium for a very long time would remain a challenge. So we need to find solutions, that what could be the alternative materials which we can use for the batteries, how efficient it could be, and then what kind of energy we can store and how much. So constant research is going on in this way. And third and most important thing is our future of tomorrow, where we draw energy from any system, be it wind energy, solar energy, nuclear plant, thermal power plant, or hydroelectric plant, or any kind of energy. And then we are supplying it to the city. And then also several parts of the city will produce energy. So what is happening, that we are expecting that each house top would have a solar plant. Area which are close to the coastal will have wind energy provision. And we need to work out smart grids which could absorb any kind of energy and then provide you in a simpler form. So, of course, this is not as simple as the map of picture shown here, but idea is simple that we could collect energy from any part and then we could supply it to household, we could supply it to industries. Already in even in Delhi, we have started these experiments when all new structures are rich with solar energy and they are using most of the facilities, they are running it on solar. But we are hoping that in time to come, we need to develop some campuses as an example, which are energy self-sufficient and which are not borrowing from the grid, but whatever energy they are consuming, they are producing it by themselves. And this is not very far, it will come. So this is just to tell you what are the areas we are focusing in energy. And then when we have the energy alternate sources, we are looking for intelligent and green transport. Now, green transport means not only they will be using biofuel or batteries, we are expecting supercapacitor being powered by particular battery, which will help us to run our buses, our trucks, our cars, our two-wheelers, so that our dependency on fuel, which causes smoke, which causes pollution, is reduced. And then, of course, these transport is going to become intelligent. So we are going to connect them with various GPS and RSUs so that there is a constant possibility that we could locate which vehicle is where. You know how exciting it would be if I know that if I am taking a particular bus, you might have seen it already in the metro, that it tells you that next metro will arrive in so many minutes. And same thing would happen on the bus stop, like DTC bus stop. They can tell you next bus has got 5 seats, good. Next bus on this particular route has got 5 seats or 10 seats and would arrive in so many minutes. So these are the new things which we are working upon. Then let me take another subject which is quite important, and that is health or healthcare. Healthcare, well, nothing like maintaining your health yourself. So if you don't get any intervention, that is the best thing. And nature has given us, nature has taught us how we can do it and how we can maintain it. So there are several challenges in healthcare if you are required to do it. You know, India is home to 5-star hospitals. We get a lot of patients from US, Canada, Europe for treatment into India. But the common Indian cannot afford it, those 5-star hospitals. So for common Indian, the treatment given or treatment available is rather poor. So what we are constantly looking for is if we could make treatment affordable. I'm sorry to learn that during the current pandemic also so many families lost because they didn't have money to support, money to get their family members examined and treated by the doctors because they didn't have money. So is it the price we have to pay? So we are constantly working on reducing the cost of drug development and treatment. So that is enough. On the other hand, we have realized that this is the time when we can go for personalized medicine. Now, personalized medicine means, you know, each one of us is different, and something you may like, I may not like. So same happens with the medicines also, that some medicine will suit someone, but same medicine would become allergic to some other person. So what is happening that based on several records, which I'll come to a little later on artificial intelligence, based on several data sets, we work out that if this is your history, you have been problem with such and such disease, chemical compositions, molecules, medicines, then in future you can do or go for such and such medicines. So now lot of it is something like your personalized advertisement. When you open internet, you type anything on Google, I am going to Agra. Within 2 minutes, you will find on your screen lot of advertisement related to Agra, offering their hotel, offering taxi service, offering touristic services, whatnot. Because Google is sensing what you are writing, and immediately thereafter, it will start giving you personalized advertisement. And after that, if you go to your Facebook page or Twitter page, you will again find same advertisement because you have written that you are going to Agra. So it will keep on reminding you that these are the options available. So same way, like we have got personalized advertisement, personalized medicine will come, and we will see it in near future. Then this current pandemic has given us a lot of lessons. As far as biology is concerned, there are 2 or 3 major things. One, we have to understand the virology of the virus. Okay, so all epidemiological studies, and what we are doing, we are not working only against the current virus and its mutant. We have to get ready, be prepared for future viral attacks. Okay, so how the world will evolve, or how the rivalry or non-military war will take place. Probably this is one of the route that you are thrown into biological war. So we need to protect ourselves from any possible future viral attack. So a lot of research is required to be done. What could be the possible viral attack, how it has to shape up, and what could be the second is we need to constantly work on the therapeutics. We need to find new treatments. So we started with the repurposing of drugs. So for example, when the pandemic arrived, nobody was prepared. We started working with medicines which were given for pneumonia, which was given for malaria, several other diseases. We tried tuberculosis, if that could affect. So we repurposed, but simultaneously we worked upon possible protection. So now, as you know, that we have developed vaccines. Not only us, but several countries in the world have developed vaccines. And we are so happy to share that we have the highest number in terms of vaccination of the individuals. Although in terms of percentage, this is not sufficient. We have just vaccinated 40% of our population by first dose, and only 20% by both doses. And still we are working if we require any booster. So these are the opportunities the current pandemic has thrown. But what we need to work upon in time to come, how the new drug development will take place. And then artificial intelligence. Of course, I'll discuss about artificial intelligence separately also. But here, what I have tried to project to you, how artificial intelligence is important for healthcare. So there are not only devices, but also imaging and a lot of generative research, drug discovery. So a lot of things are based. So unless you study mathematics, unless you study those dynamics of repetition, multiplication, computation, analytics, your research in healthcare will. So as a biologist, you should have a good background of what is happening in other sectors of the healthcare. And then robotics. The robotics also plays a very, very important role. So this is a combination of artificial intelligence and mechanical engineering. And most sensitive surgeries these days are being performed by the robots, not by the doctors, because it requires very, very precise incursion. So for that, we are going through this. And then, of Of course, as a healthcare, we should produce equipment, devices, implants, uh, and any support system which provide assistive technologies, assistive material to our larger society, especially those who are either differently abled, visually impaired, elderly, living in remote areas. So we need to constantly work on it. And it requires, as you can see, it is a mixture of different sciences, and people from different walk of life are coming in and improving upon. Now, I will tell you the recent examples. For example, wheelchair. Now, wheelchair, our concept was originally the patient could sit on the wheel and we can move the wheel from one place to the other. Then we had the motored wheelchair, so through which the fellow could move from one place to another. Now we have developed wheelchair which could climb up the stairs or come down. So there is a constant innovation, constant improvement in whatever we are doing. Now, remember, when you are doing biology, two things are very important. One is biosafety and one is bioethics. Current pandemic, I don't know if it is a gift of biosafety failure or it's a designed one. That could be debated. But suppose if it is a result of biosafety failure, then we need to become more and more clear in our approach. And then we need to classify that what are the low risk microbes, what are the high risk microbes. And safety is very, very important. As far as ethics is concerned, we discussed about earlier life and death, which is still not fully understood. And then there are a lot of requirements or desire, let me say, not requirement, desire, that if we could reproduce the human being, we could clone it. We have already done it with the sheep. We have already done with buffaloes, cows. Can we reproduce the human embryo? That is something. And why they are asking? Because if any of your organ get a disease, then probably with the help of your embryo clone, you could correct it. But how much that would be correct, we don't know. Okay, so a lot of ethics play. Similarly, if you are on a deathbed, you are struggling with a disease, and doctor says, sorry, I can't improve you. I have virtually given up. Should you die? So euthanasia death is a demand. But again, ethics play a role. Should we allow, should we not allow? And then there are simpler things like genetic engineering, organic transplants, stem cells. So ethics plays a very, very important role in both biology and medicine, and we need to take into account. The other thing, especially in the pharma sector, is of how research could be done. Should it be done in a protected environment so that you can make profit, or it could be done in open source and we could share the profit? Or there is no profit, but it is provided to the society at low cost. So, for example, in the current pandemic, certain countries have developed vaccine and they are now having protected it with the patent. Whereas there are a lot of poor countries which cannot pay to those companies, but are looking for those vaccines. So India is arguing at WTO that it should be made free of patent so that anybody can reproduce. Right now, debate is on. We don't know what will happen. We will be able to get it free in case of this humanity, the large number of global population has still not got it. But on the other hand, there is pharma industry which is looking constantly to make money out of this. So they would not like it to be patent free. Another example of open source is the research on tuberculosis. Now, tuberculosis is called disease of the poor. And a lot of rich countries which are not having this problem, they are not investing any money into research of such disease. So what we have done, we have gone for an open source platform, and we are working on tuberculosis research in the open source environment, so that the medicines, the molecule, whatever is developed, converted into medicine is available to a larger number of people. Another challenge before us is environment. I think for people living in this city, I need not to explain the importance of it. This shows only the air pollution, but we have got pollution in our water, in our soil, and everywhere. So it is up to us how we can protect our environment. So a lot of study is being done on improving these environmental conditions so that we can make this planet a better place to live. I think this is the only planet, so it's all the more region. And otherwise, some of the species, including human species, may vanish if we don't correct ourselves. So now coming to artificial intelligence, of course, I have told you this application, and it could act like a human intelligence. It could visualize, it could hear, it could talk, it could act as a, so it could act as any of the human behavior. The only thing is the difference between human intelligence and artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence works only on logic with no emotions. Human intelligence sometimes gets influenced by the emotions. So it could do any work, whatever we would like it to do. But problem is, for example, artificial intelligence depends a lot on data sets. And those data sets are not uniform. So for example, we are talking about patient care. So if you go to hospital X, then they maintain data set in a different order than the hospital Y, than the hospital Z. So we need to standardize those things. And also we need to make sure that the skill set which is available is of the same aptitude. So we need to train them, we need to harmonize the data, and more data, the artificial intelligence would be more and more helpful. I'll give you another example. For example, all of you might have seen the train booking system. So how the seats are allotted in the train. So the fellow who books the first ticket will get a seat, assuming all bogies are for the same destination, like Delhi to Chennai. So all bogies are for the Delhi to Chennai. So system will first allot first ticketing fellow a seat in the central bogie, then in the first bogie, then in the last bogie. It has to continuously balance the load in the train. But the human intelligence says that when the train arrives on the platform, everybody will rush in whatever compartment to get a seat, which is not correct. And sometimes some of the bogies are overcrowded, and which is not good for a healthy transport system. So that is the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. The new thing which we are going to get is quantum technology. Now this is one step further. So what our computers could not do, quantum technology will do. So this is more precise. So even like imaging or sensing, it is several times faster than our supercomputers. So for this, of course, a lot of research is being done that how we will do it, but we are in a good positions already. A lot of work has been done on we have identified quantum materials, sensors, um, and software. So all these things are being happening, and we will see a lot of use of quantum technology in recent time to come. Then, of course, we are talking about clean fuels. So clean fuel, already we have discussed about biofuel. We are looking for batteries, that also we have discussed. Hydrogen fuel is another thing which we are looking for. And idea is that it should not pollute the environment. So that's the basic task which we are doing. And we are hoping to do a lot of research on cleaner, on development of cleaner fuels, making it more efficient and making it available to our society. Then one of the new things which we are developing is improvement in the manufacturing side. So we have come from traditional manufacturing to mechanized manufacturing. Now we are talking about additive manufacturing or three-dimensional manufacturing. And even body parts could be reproduced. So like artificial heart, valve, artificial lungs, you can produce it with such technology, and which are already in market. Such products are already in the market. So if a human organ gets failed, you could replace it with an artificially produced organ, which could act as well. So while you can identify a design, feed into the system that this is what I am looking for, then you provide the system the material, what you would like it to use, and it can produce a product of your requirements. Then, on the other hand, we are having another branch, which is nanotechnology. I think nanotechnology is one of the most underrated science, and we have heard more about it in last 20 years or so. But we have been practicing it for very, very long. For example, each one of you would have enjoyed chutneys made at home or kajal made at home. This is all nanotechnology. And this we have been doing for ages. Our Vaidyas, they were not giving us medicine just like that. They were grating it at the nanoscale before giving us. So the concepts of nanotechnologies were being practiced in India for very, very long. Of course, now at that time we have not documented that, validated, scientifically validated. That is a question mark. But they were in practice. Now, of course, there is a lot of focus on nanotechnological approach, especially for drug delivery. Like if a particular part of the body is having certain problem, they require certain proteins, certain drugs. So how nanotechnology could help? So not only nanomaterials, but nano devices are there in the market. And I'm so happy to tell you that in terms of scientific research output, India is globally number 3 in terms of nanotechnology research. So a lot of focus is being given on it. And then let me talk about the space technology, where India is a global leader. We are launching satellite even for America or several other European and developed countries. And we have got a record that through in one of the launch, we launched 100 vehicles, 100 satellite, more than 100 satellite, 104 to be precise, in one go. And these technologies are helping us in number of ways, like imaging technology, satellite technology, weather forecasting, smoke detections. So how it is helping us? So when you are studying it as a biology student, so you would realize that how the satellite images help you in seeing the overall picture of a bigger area. And then you could plan how things would be done. And then there is a lot of research also on human behavior in outer space. That is a new thing. So if there is a life outside Earth, of course, we are not very sure, but we are exploring that. But before reaching that stage, we would like to see how do human behaves in various space flights. So whenever any astronaut goes to the space, one of the tasks which is constantly given is on human behavior, on the efficacy of medicines, efficacy of food. So those kind of things are always going on. Now, I am approaching conclusion of my talk, and I have only two messages for you. One is that a lot of scientists, what they are doing, society at large is not aware of. So we need to communicate. I'm not sure in your college how many research journal you are reading. So even our students are not reading the journal, which means that there is a huge gap between textbooks and the research journal. So knowledge of today to reach students in the form of textbook may take 3 to 4 years. And what about the common man who is not studying science? So we require a huge focus on science communications. And we need to convert what research we are doing, how it is useful to our society. As we are doing research, we are doing it for a generation of knowledge or development of a product or a process, but we must communicate. We must tell to the society, yes, this is what we are doing, and this is how it will help us. So science communication is a big factor. My department, we have started recently. We have started translating science pages on Wikipedia into Indian languages. We have started a science channel. We have started a scheme called Upsal, in which we are asking research students to write blogs or write to newspaper or magazine about their research, what they are doing, so that they can keep explaining it to common men, and that would help us going along. And second thing is, we need to be innovative. There are a lot of possibilities of promotion of innovations, and you need to be creative. You need to think about any particular issue. It could be a local issue, national issue, regional issue, or a global issue. And you need to work out the possible solution, which is possible through research, and you need to devise or produce a new product, a new process, and then you could see if it is a commercially viable. We are with you in this journey. I would wish you all good luck. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening and informative talk. It was comprehensive and insightful. There was so much to learn and explore. We feel immense pleasure to have got a chance to listen to such inspiring words from you. We take honor in expressing our gratitude to you for gracing our event. I am sure all the participants today have a lot to take away with them. Thank you, sir, for such an elaborate talk. Now, I would like to open the floor for question and answer session. I would request the participants to drop their questions in the chat box. So the first question is from Arushi. The question is, sir, there has been many plans launched by government, but execution seems impossible. What do you think is the major hurdle?
Anything that we need to execute, we need to execute it from our own personal level. If we bank upon others, that others will do it, then it will never happen. So we need to come out of our comfort zone. And the whole concept of disruption technologies or disruptive technology is that they will break open and come out with something new. Now, today, even if we through our research, if we improve upon a particular product, acceptability become a challenge. So we need to start it somewhere. Okay. And ideal person would be myself and yourself. If we believe in that research, if we believe in that research product, we need to do it ourselves. So any scheme launched by government, you cannot enforce upon its citizen. It could be all voluntary. For example, now today vaccine is there, but a lot of people are not coming up for vaccination. Nobody can force them. You can just suggest them. It is up to them whether they would like to come or they would not like to. So same way, government schemes, they are absolutely voluntary, and you have to see if you would like to use it.
The next question is from Sonika. How technology can improve the health in India?
I'm sorry, your voice was breaking. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, your voice was breaking. I couldn't listen to the question. Can you repeat it?
Yes, sir. The question is how technology can improve the healthcare in India.
Oh, yes. You know, we have discussed about this. So one of the major player we use is artificial intelligence, and we showed you that what are the different senses. So what is happening, for example, if you are living in a remote location where there is no hospital, and now we have developed a process that if you can get X-ray through your phone. So we have launched a portal called X-Ray Setu. This is the advantage of modern technology. Now, teleconsultation, telemedicine was already in practice, where you could consult a senior doctor, and all execution or procedures could be done by a younger chip or less experienced chip. So now quantum technologies are coming, which are again going to play a very, very useful role in healthcare. So all those new technologies which are coming up, not only they are targeting development of new drugs or new molecules, new vaccines, but they are also in the process of simplifying the treatment by non-invasive products, so that your body is not touched and we could do it from a distance, and all diagnostics could be taken care of. Only for treatment, whether you need to take medicines either orally or in injectable forms, or you require surgery, then only a patient should be touched. But otherwise, all diagnostics in time to come would be non-invasive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The question is from Rajan Varshne. Low carbon H2 is now underused in many applications. It is high time India invests now in H2. This field is with front loaded.
I'm sorry, actually, your voice system is somehow not very clear. Can you, yeah, what time this question was posted? If I can see the chat box.
The question is, low carbon H2 is now underused in many applications. It is high time India invests now in H2. This field is with front loaded.
Oh yes, we are quite worried about it. India has signed Kyoto Declaration. Are absolutely concerned about the carbon release. So carbon footprints are being mapped, and we are cautious about the future technologies for these purposes.
Next question is from Amisha. Sir, there are many plans taken up by government like Ganga Action Plan. So what type of technology is used in nature conservation?
You know, it's not one or two, but it's a application of several technologies. So we are through satellite, we are seeing how it is river is going and how water, the physical characters of waters. Then we are also studying it chemically, like what could be the microbe character or what are the pollutants in that. And then we are looking for the course corrections. So you have to make sure that the river is saved from physical impurities, chemical impurity, and biological impurities. So for that, several technology are being applied, and all newer technologies which you mentioned in my talk are being going to be applied for this purpose.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Mahi Verma. Sir, do you think that the ways in which humans have interfered with nature is the reason behind this ongoing pandemic?
It could be. You know, I also said that we are not, of course, sure about it. If it was an accident, so biosafety norms are violated, and we got this pandemic because of that, or it was from one of the mammals, the bat, which has caused it. But if we are not careful, such incidents may rise. And what we are worried for is the biological warfare. It could be one of them. So I hope, I'm not sure how many of you may remember, but probably your faculty may remember. The last we have BioBar, it was very, very small. We had plague in Surat. And of course, it was highly localized. It could not spread beyond Surat, and we could contain it. But it caused a huge disruption. And today, when we are in the COVID time, we realize that what are the different kind of restrictions. We can't sit together, we can't crowd, we can't travel. So all those kind of issues are being faced. So we need to be very clear about this bioethics, and probably this could be because of some biosafety violations.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Shashank Shekhar. Sir, nanotechnology is so much in use for therapeutics in case of cancer especially. Where do we stand against the COVID diagnosis and treatment? Can we expect the upcoming nano vaccine?
You know, most of the research which we are doing, there are two kind of researches which we are doing. One is again a known target, and second is against unknown target. So COVID was virtually unknown until it arrived. So we took time, and even today you will see that vaccines which are being administered are not certified for use. Only emergency use authorization has been given, which means that proper biological, clinical, or medical procedures have not been completed. Okay, so that is a very serious issue, and world over there is a lot of concern that if we are going to use future medicine as emergency use authorization. So as far as COVID vaccine is concerned, there is a role of nanotechnology in that also, and we are targeting how it could be delivered and to the affected organs inside the body. But still, we have not understood the COVID disease fully. And I have heard several cases where people who got symptomatically recovered got either cardiac shock or some lung infection or some other kind of disease 7 to 8 days after returning from hospital. So we need to understand the disease, and obviously nanotechnology will play a very critical role in time to come for its improvement or for its further development of therapies, molecules, drugs, or vaccines.
Thank you very much, sir, for answering all the queries so patiently. It would be a great pleasure for us to listen to you again at our future events. Now, I would like to call our President, Mr. Akash Kumar Sahani, and Vice President, Mr. Vikram Shehrawat, to present the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative talk. Life Science Fraternity, under the flagship of Department of Botany, Chemistry, and Zoology, constituted Life Sciences Society, Synergia, founded by Dr. Manisha Sengar Ma'am, Associate Professor, inaugurated by our Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Rajiv Agrawal, and Chief Guest for the day, Dr. Ajay Kumar Singh, Director General Life Sciences, DGLS, DRDO Headquarters, on March 9, 2021. Its goal is to create and maintain a vital platform to enable budding life scientists to have a broad view of applying the three disciplines, that is botany, chemistry, and zoology, together in the fields of research, development, education, industry, and entrepreneurship. It holds various webinars to discuss ways to foster responsible innovation, sustainable development, and user-driven social policies. To prepare our future leaders, society is run by its very dynamic office bearers and council members, under the guidance of conveners and co-conveners from Department of Botany, Chemistry, and Zoology. Students are also exposed to a wide variety of text and lots of interactive content, from articles, poems, and scientific paper to non-fiction like puzzles, nature photography, etc., with the help of its annual magazine, Trinity, which offers an abundance of high-interest content to support the academic as well as non-academic curriculum. Society is equally active in organizing co-curricular activities like logo designing competition, scientific paper presentation, poster making, logo designing, etc., in order to prepare our future leaders and serve the country and the world with their best possible potentials. Now, I would request our President, Mr. Akash Kumar Sahani, to take the event further.